Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 1, Chapter 140. We're concluding Discourse 35. So we moved on from Yichud Abba Ve'ima, Tatoin, from the lower unification of Chochmah and Bina, which was called another name for it, Yisrael, Saba, and Tfuna, was primarily the midas of Meichen, the inclinations that intelligence takes you to Chesed, to Gvura, to Din, and so on. Or more particularly Nihi in Chochmah and Bina. Nihi is not just inclinations, also how to explain it, the wisdom and the skill of explaining it to a student and applying it to each particular makabel. So you see, it's all about a relationship to lower levels. So as contrast to that, we move on to Abba Ve'ima Ilayin, Yichud Pnimi of Chochmah and Bina. Yichud Pnimi of Chochmah and Bina. Now we're getting into the power of intellect as it is on its own, not as it relates to other things. So it's not like for example, the difference is Asukah Shmaita Liba de Hilchasa. You know, he didn't bring this example. You learn Torah to get the halacha. Remember, the halacha we said was Yaakov actually, Psakdin. Then there's a reason. But you're learning to get the halacha. So that's a learning, a very deep learning, with all the reasons. But there is a application. It's to derive a conclusion. It's to provide a legal ruling, to provide a clarity in a shaila or something. Then there's intellect on its own, which focuses on the mind itself, what he calls the asagas hamuhus, especially not silus. So he said we don't have asagas hamuhus today, really. And it's hard for us and difficult. We can't really understand this in a full comprehension, but we can definitely have a taste of it. We call what he called lahavin efes k'tzei mizeh. So even today we could also have a sense of it, but now we're talking about Yichud Abba Ve'ima Ilayin. And he began by explaining the idea of Hanochas Sichlis, the Kudus HaSkola. Chochmah on this level is not Chochmah that is ultimately going to bring through Bina to Midas Zah, the Midas Sheba Meichen or Nehi Sheba Meichen. But now we're talking how Chochmah and Bina work more internally. So, to explain this, in Chochmah there's the idea of Hanochas Sichlis. Makes it very clear. This is one notch above comprehension. You sense the truth of it, the conviction, the resonance. Afterwards you start thinking about it, you apply yourself, you don't really get it yet. But that still doesn't mean that you don't have that resonance. Like he says, it's one step. It's not, the primary force there is the resonance, not the seichel. Then comes step 2, where you bring it down, you start thinking about it, and you begin to comprehend it. I guess especially in Bina, you begin to comprehend it, and there you come to a conclusion, the tamtis of Bina, which connects to the Nekudas HaSkola, which is what he said here was the Hanochas Sichlis. So the resonance that you had in the beginning has now gone through the filter of comprehension. So you have both elements. You have resonance, and at the same time you also have Yisashvus. It's also internalized. A little later he's going to say that's the beginning of a sensing of Hasagas Muhus, because the resonance is like a Muhus thing. You're sensing something more than just comprehending the Mitzias, the existence of something. You sense a deeper truth in it. Okay. And that he calls, now this is when Chochmah and Bina work in this fashion, and I just described, they unite. It's called Nekuda Behechala. Nekuda Behechala, the point in the chamber. So there's like a marriage between the two, which he continues to elaborate is Meitzer Yam and Meitzer Mi. To explain that, he gives the example of there's two ways a teacher and student relate to each other. One is on a more superficial, he calls Chitzeni, so Yichud Chitzeni. That would be the Yichud Chitzeni of Chochmah and Bina. There, the recipient, the teacher, they're all dealing more with the surface of the idea. Questions are more surface level, they're more immediate answers. Then there's a Yichud Pnimi, where the student goes into the emek, the depth and the core idea, and the teacher reciprocates rather. Commensurates? I don't know if it's a word. Reciprocates. Right, commensurately. And he too gives from a deeper thing, from a deeper place than the Kudah. So Nakuda of Chachma is speaking to Nakuda of Bina. They're going back and forth. And now when a question is asked, it's a far deeper question. And the answer therefore also can't just be a quick answer. He has to go into Makar HaSeichel, he has to go into the source and give a deeper answer. That bond, where they connect on that core level, then develops into Bina, Merchav, as he says. Now we're talking Bina, obviously, Primi is Bina. And he says, this is Chacham b'Bina and Haven b'Chachma. Chacham b'Bina is out because the Nekuda Primi is the Bina Shemekabel is Primi and Nekuda Chachma. So in Bina is how Bina receives this. It's like the recipient receiving the core wisdom from the teacher, not just the superficial or the outer dimension. And then he goes backwards. Haven b'Chachma, it starts the other way around. Haven b'Chachma, he says, is the Bina within Chachma, which means the resonance. Like she b'chinas primis shalah. Then b'chinas hasagas hanochas sichlis. So Haven b'Chachma, this line, I honestly need more explanation. I'm not sure what it means exactly. I get that general idea. The line where, before the parentheses, where he says, Yesh le'emes shezeyin Haven b'Chachma, what does he say? Shezeu kamei al derech moshel, nekudas haskolos ha'chachma. So Haven b'Chachma is the nekudas haskolos the Chachma, which before, he didn't say it was the Bina and Chachma, he said it was the Chachma. That's what Chachma's power is, that it's not pure logic, like he spoke in Perek Mem Beis, it's the resonance. But he says, Avol, what does he say here? Primis of Chachma. Lakshu b'chinas ha-primius shalah. Primius of what? In other words, in the Kudas HaSkola itself, there's a Nochas Sichlis, there's a Primius within it. Dahin b'chinas ha-Nochas Sichlis. So I'm not clear what is that. It seems to me that in the Kudas HaSkola of Chachma has two levels. The outer Chachma, maybe that's what he means. So the outer Chachma is just the spark of the idea, which, as we said, the teacher and student have, but they have it on a Chatzenizdika level. The teacher is giving, Chachma is the teacher. He's giving something to the student, but he's giving him not the depth. And here, Haven b'Chachma, he's saying, is that you're getting the Pnimius of a Chachma, and that is the resonance, Hanochas Sichlis. So Samtus is Chachma shebechachma. Hanochas Sichlis, Yesh Sichli, Harizeh b'chinas Haven b'Chachma. Okay. So basically, it's like there's almost like three levels in Chachma. There's a Samtus of Chachma, there's Chachma shebechachma, there's four levels actually. There's Chachma shebechachma, which is the Samtus, which is, I guess, just the flash just comes in, it's like a godly truth. Then there's the Bina shebechachma, that
you can't give that over.
Right. Then there's the Bina shebechachma, since is Hanochas Sichlis, it's already Seichel. His Samtus is not Seichel. Now we're talking, it's in the world of Seichel, but it's not comprehension, it's a sense of conviction of truth, of conviction and resonance of the idea. That's, he says clearly, Haven b'Chachma, v'hasichli shebenekuda.
That you could give over?
The resonance, it looks like for a Primizdika student, you could.
Yeah.
Not a Chatzenizdika student.
How would you call it?
1 second. And then comes the sichli shebenekuda. What he spoke earlier was, like when you actually do understand, that's you say it Abba. V'anochu b'chinas Haven. But Hanoch is the Haven, is the Chachma, is the again. He repeats that. Okay, that's essentially what he says. Fine, so be it. What's your question?
How is that? I mean, resonance, right? How is that the Penimis of Chachma?
He made that clear because it's lower level than what?
It's somewhere between Chachma and Bina, let's say. It's not quite.
No, it's higher than Seichel. Because you don't yet understand it. You can't explain it yet. He said clearly. You don't really, you can't explain it, but you sense you have a conviction, a resonance of the truth of it.
And that's as high as Chachma, even to call Penimis of Chachma.
He spoke about it in the previous chapter, yeah. And then he says, yeah.
Okay.
He says,
I thought you weren't sure.
You can't explain it, but
no, for sure. I am sure about that. That's for sure. He says, Hainu shanochas sichlis hayesel masichli. Yeah. Then comes comprehension. The problem is that what's not really spelled out where the comprehension begins. There's a beginning of Chachma, there's a beginning of Bina. But regardless, it's definitely moving its way downward. The bottom line moves its way downward, and clearly Haven b'Chachma is.
You can't explain, but he could give it over within the.
I guess with a deeper student, the student who's digging deeper, right, he can ultimately get that.
Does
yeah.
he get it right away, or
probably la'achar, I would say. No. Maybe la'achar in the tamsis. There's Bina, the tamsis of Bina, And then by Aboyim Shnin for sure. Aboyim Shnin is even the Chetzenis the guy gets it.
He gets the more previous part of it.
Aboyim Shnin is even a guy who just gets Chetzenis Hakav. But Derech Tzara, even if he didn't go deep now. We're talking about a student and a teacher sitting with the teacher there, that the student is completely absorbed. What did he say? That he pushes everything away. That's the Tzimtzum Mitzray Meitzer Mi.
Yeah.
Meitzer Yam. Yeah. Anyway,
the Rabbi gives over to the student to Chetzenis and Seichel.
In there is Melubash the previous, but that's not going to happen right now. That's going to take time.
Melubash, even though he's giving him over.
Yeah. Because it's also, I would say so. Here we're talking right now what's coming out. It says, "V'hi shemislaberes b'chinas pnimis bina shu in chochma bina." Anyway, then he concludes the chapter by basically saying that through this we have a hasagas mahus, because you have an element of resonance, something beyond pure logic, something that you sense something deeper, and you're also with bina have it comprehended. And la'asud lavi, this will become full blown, where you'll have the real deeper einig, the pnimius atik, through Pnimius Abba, and it will join Pnimius Bina in a comprehension. You basically have the ultimate interface. Because you could say, you know what, yes, you can experience God, but you have to give up your logic. You have to give up your parameters. And then you experience God through faith, through awe, through Kabbalah Sel. There's a lot of ways you can do it. When it comes to comprehending is on your terms. On your terms, one cannot understand God. Let's machshava tvisabah. You can't understand God. He's saying that ultimately, Lasad Lavi will be the real interface that we will, with our comprehension, will be able to relate to the deepest levels. Now that's where yichud, the real yichud of Abba and Ima, of Chochma and Bina, happen. Because Chochma provides the mechus, the godliness in it, it's called the bligvul of it, and Bina provides the gvul, the comprehension. Today, as he said earlier, it's very impossible to really have a Soga Gemura. We can't really appreciate this because it seems so contradictory. But for example, it's essentially what we're saying is what Levitza Barditza said. You're giving them Elam Hazeh that they can touch, and Elam Haba you write about in the books. Give them Elam Hazeh that Elam Haba they can touch, and put Elam Hazeh in the books. What happens when you have both? You'll have Elam Hazeh, and you'll be able to appreciate Ruchnis like we appreciate Gashmis today. Imagine, you look at, someone says to you, how do you know it's day? I look out the window, I see it's day. That's Muhus. Ruchnis will be as Pshitis. When you say Elakuz B'Pshitis, Elam is B'Schachus. So today, godliness is a novelty, innovation. It needs. And Elam Hazeh, Elam is obvious, right? Your body you can relate to. Your soul is a little more abstract. The Love you'll have that the soul will be as tangible as the body is today.
Well, we relate to Gashmis with the five senses. Will that be the case in Love?
Yeah, but it'll be Gashmis and Ruchnis Yachad.
The five senses, you'll be able to touch it, smell it, hear it.
Or it will be as true as if you touch it, smell it. But there won't be anything missing. It'll be as true. Look, the exact meaning would be because Gashmis itself is really Ruchnis. Gashmis is Elokus. It says, so today we couldn't exist. You will be able to exist. I'm saying that's why he's saying it's not easy to comprehend today. That's why in Chochmah you have a taste of it when you have a sense of something beyond, and you bring it into your life.
It happened in my Matan Torah.
The Halacha.
So now we have the Kav. That was his last thing, the Kav. The core of the Kav, which is primarily the Pnimis HaKav that we spoke about earlier, will manifest in Chachma. Remember we said, when he said, B'yesel Yuvan, he says, Moshla Kadmeni, Torah is Chachma, comes from Chachma, Reis Mechachma Nafkas. Torah comes from wisdom. How far does wisdom go? That's the question. That's the real issue on the table. So you could argue wisdom has a ceiling. Wisdom is human wisdom. even if it's divine wisdom, wisdom is based on laws of logic, rules. Wisdom can never go where faith goes. Right? So you can argue that. Let me say less machshava tzvik lav. The tough is berusa deliba. Fine. So you need to have something else, not wisdom. The key is, and this is also the chiddush of Chabad Chassidus, that Chochmah, like he says in Tanya, Lamed Perek Lamed Hey, has an element that allows elokus into it. It's like a small passage. That's why Chochmah is the then sense of awe. Oh wow, where'd that flash come from? It's the sense of resonance. It's his samtus that he mentioned. I'm not going down to the actual levels, but all that Chochmah has. So you suddenly have wisdom meets something that's beyond wisdom. If, for example, we didn't have the concept that an idea falls into your head, you wake up in the morning, you have an idea, it's not a flash. It's a full-blown idea, you get it on a platter. Not a seed. You wouldn't have a taste in your logic of something beyond. Here, you see clearly that even logic and even wisdom comes from somewhere beyond wisdom. In Asis of Chassidus, this is that Chochmah Vatzilis is rooted in the Chochmah of the 10 hidden spheres. And Chochmah of the 10 hidden spheres, if you recall, is manifests the Elokus that's higher than the Chochmah of the 10 hidden spheres. I just want to go back to that line because I thought it was a critical line. Where he said, Atayr is Mashal Kadmeni, he said, here we go. Just like in Chochmah Vatzilis, you could underline this. This is a very critical line. It's like the key line of the interface. So, page Reish Samach Vov. Like 2/3 of the way down. So he says like this. Just like in Chochmah Vatzilis Sheda rests, which is Atzmus HaKav, the core of the Kav, not the reflection. So the claim the b'chochma shebesas agud is made b'chinas pnimis ein sof. So you see, all the way through Chochmah is the channel between b'li gvul and gvul. Critical line. So at the end of the day, with all the distance existence has from the divine, Chochmah is a channel that allows in new realities. And that's going to be Matan Torah. The Ovis expanded the containers as far as you can go within structure. And what Matan Torah will do is introduce into Chochmah the Eir HaBligvul. That's how I would explain it. Hear what I just said? So the Ovis, they expand the containers as far as you can. Kel Shaddai, and we spoke Yichud, Abba ve'imei Tatayin, and Meichin and Midas, and Yisrael Sabbat Funa, as far as you can go. And Matan Torah will add that dimension, that Chochmah becomes a channel to receive from higher than Chochmah, from Keser essentially, or from Atzmas Ein Sof Lifnei Atzimtzum. And that will be the key that La'asad Lavei will finally come to fruition, because Matan Torah is like Erison, the beginning of the marriage, and La'asad Lavei will be the end, where it will come to fruition where Chochmah and Bina, meaning Chochmah representing opening up that channel to Atzmas Ein Sof, and Bina representing the Kabul, the recipient, will join together. And today, we have a taste of it when we have a student and a teacher who really connect on the core level, not just on a shallow level, the core level, where there begins to be a resonance and a sagas mahus to some extent, even in our times today. So essentially, the skashus, let's say, from a chassid to a rebbe, when he's learning with him, but not, like he said, he puts everything aside and allows himself to focus completely. The kivutz and the tzimtzum, what he called the concentration, the focus, is such that laser energy allows you to have a taste of this yichud that will be La'asad Lavei in full blown. I think that's the core of this whole discussion. Huh? No. It says more the Meichin is more not Abba ve'im Ilan. It's more Meichin of Yisrael Saba and Tfuna.
That's the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, in general, obviously they had an element of that, but primarily it's Yisrael Saba. That's for sure. That's the lower yichud. Very good. I still didn't look up the sources and other things to explain, but I mean, the Teichen is very clear. The lines, exactly the levels, where is the Samtus, where Bina comes to Chochmah Bina, that's need a little more Ayin. I'll look into it and we'll go through the lines, but I think the overall picture is clearly the whole picture of the Yichud of Gvul and Bli Gvul. Yeah, it's very good. You see a lot of things here that are tying strings that were spoken much earlier, especially the Kav. That's a key giveaway, because the Kav takes you back into, because the Kav is the Chetzenis HaKav, Primis Kav is like Chetzenis Chachma Bina and Primis Chachma Bina, essentially, in broader terms. Very good.
Takes us to the roof.
Beyond the roof. Poka Igra. Poka Igra. This means Poka Igra. A Pesach. Poka Igra. The roof should plats open. The Rebbe spoke sometimes for bringing his Pesach. Say L'chaim and Poka Igra. We should blow the roof off. Yeah, that's the expression.
At the end of the day,
but you got to first be in the building. Like I said, you have to have Yoda before Adala Yoda. or else you're cheating.
Cheating on the process.
It's good. Okay, so let's continue next chapter. So we have to go over this again. I'm sure it's going to get clearer. Meitzer ma, mei, and meitzer yam. Meitzer mi, and meitzer yam. That's Veheinif Yodei. Al Hanor. I didn't have a chance to look at the Mamorim. I'm going to look. I'll have Shabbos. I'll have more time. V'heinif Yodei al Hanor is the second half of the pasuk. Is talking about the split that will happen. L'aseh Love, which is Bina. Pnimi is Bina. Heinif Yodei al Hanor. The Nor of Bina will be split, and what will emerge will be the Pnimis Emek, the depth of the Mayon, of the spring of Chachma as it is in its core. As you said, everything that's deep is always in the form of Meitzer, like drops. In other words, the fact that Chachma comes drop by drop tells you how deep it is. Because things that flow are already more expressive. The drops show you that it's a very intense core energy, and you just get a drop of it, just a drop. So all Atzmi, when it expresses itself, is through tippin, through drops. Okay.
Let's see.
That's V'heinif by Matan Teira, by Kriyas Shams, which was Achana to Matan Teira. There he says the lashon was Yechrim. V'hichrim L'shein V'hichrim es L'shein Yam Mitzrayim or something like that. So Hichrim, I think we established Hichrim is from the word he actually yeah, like he actually dried up. So it's not just a and the Yam. And there it's Yam.
Then it says Veheinif.
Veheinif is the second stage.
Same pasuk.
Same pasuk, yeah.
Because talks here Shamsuv, and then the same thing will be lost with love Veheinif. But his diuk here, Zehu Shaykh Rak HaNofal HaNovleshi Yachrim Esi. Zehu Rak HaNofal HaNovleshi Yachrim Meloshin Yam.
Where does lashon meitzer meet? Where does it say that?
It's a moment short Kisfer Rizal. But you see, when he says at the bottom, the second line to the bottom, he says Yesh Leimar Kavona Riyeh. As soon as the Rebbe Shab says Yesh Leimar Kavona, it means he's quoting a lashon from the Alter Rebbe probably, or the Tzemach Tzedek, or Mitla Rebbe. Yesh Leimar Kavona. Who's Kavona? The Kavona of that Maimer that is he's quoting here. There's giveaways. There's certain hints where you see he's quoting another Maimer. What's Yesh Leimar Kavona? He's not saying he's Leimar his own Kavona. So he's quoting a line. I'll find it. It sounds to me very much either. It's probably the Mitla Rebbe actually. Not sure. I have to look. I'll find it. So I'm not really sure that what the Chiddush of Hanof and Hichrim is. The difference is V'heinif says two things: Nor, not Yam, and Heinif and not V'hechrim. So that I understand. Yam is Chochmah and Nor is Bina. By Hechrim, it's a stronger statement. It doesn't really explain. I guess Hanof is a form of Hasagas. That's what he's trying to say. Hechrim is more of more of an imposition, as we discussed.
Is also like raising, like
Hanof is Ha'emer.
Yeah. So basically, like lifting it up maybe to the level of.
So it's like Hasag. It sounds more gentle.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have the combination of the two, and I think a key element that we actually have is giving us a taste of it when student and teacher, Mishpi and Makabel, connect on that core level. So exactly what we talk about in every class. If you can push away all your thoughts and just focus, you're starting to get a connection to Atzmos. You're a doctor.
To our teacher.
Not that. No. He's saying here because then you're able to. Because as long as you're occupied with the merchav, with the expansion of your ideas, that's where you're going to live. That's where you reside. You want to go further, you got to narrow it, and it's like you got to narrow yourself to enter into the next level.
Like go out of the chutzner.
Yeah.
Narrow yourself.
You got to fit through the door.
You have to get out of the chamber of ideas.
There was the other way around, going from the chutzner out to the sha'arim. Okay, very, very fascinating stuff. Chapter 140, page 270. So we have in Hebrew, you have expression dugma is an example. Me'ein is similar. You have me'ein dugma, which is similar to an example, and then you have ume'ein udugma, which is it's similar and also an example. So we're getting here a taste of. A me'ein is like an appetizer, and an example. I'm just being medayik. That's what he's saying. Me'ein v'dugma is achshav. So we have dugma is today. Hu in yediyas hasagas alakus ma'advarim hamuchashim. Okay. He wants to give an example. How do you see where Bina and Chochmah meet today? How with the resonance of Chochmah meets comprehension of Bina. That's what he wants here. So it's an example is when you have a idea, your knowledge and a comprehension of the divine from Dvarim Mukhshim, from tangible things that you can relate to. And we say Mepsari Achzal Laka. Let's see what he's going to say. Dine Seichel Anushi Hu Shenofel B'derech Shvirim B'chinas HaKelim D'Atzilis. Seichel Anushi, meaning human logic, human intelligence, did not just emerge in a orderly fashion from the higher worlds. It fell through Shvirim B'chinas HaKelim D'Atzilis. It's interesting he uses Shvira on Kelim of Atzilus, not Kelim of Toyo.
Yeah, that's what I want to ask.
Okay, let's see. Let me see where he goes here. Let's see. Seich lanush yeshenof b'derech Shvira mebchinas haKelim d'Atzilus. So it didn't just evolve as Kelim of Atzilus. When to Bina, it's Bri, Yitzira, it fell. Let's see what he says here. The mebchinas klei habina d'Atzilus nisava bina anushis. From the container of Bina of Atzilus emerged, came into being, human Bina. Human comprehension. Let's read it. I don't want to jump here.
Obviously not mundane comprehension.
It may be. We'll see. Ooh, this lashon is very interesting. This lashon is very, very unique. You're not going to find lashonos like this in Chassidus so often. Ooh, I see here. This is. I'm betting that this chapter, or at least these lines, were written on a later stage. Because I told you, that many times you can sense a flow, and then you can sense that there's a Rebbe Rashab is going into another gear. This is another gear. I can tell you that right now. I mean, I can see from the language. I'm going to translate it to myself also. Don't worry. This needs a lot of translation. This needs a lot of depth. What does this mean? The ability, you can see he's talking about himself in a way. The comprehension in the nefesh, to comprehend things that are very distant in the evolution and the hierarchy, the gradations of the kav. My assumption what this means is, remember the kav is the ray of light. It's like what's the word I always look for? What's another word for a paintbrush? A stylus? Stylus. So it's like the kav carries all the air from all the way up and goes through the whole ishtalshus. Remember, the kav is like the spine of the cosmic order. It's a spine. It carries everything. And then it branches off, igulim, yosher, it makes pnimi, makiv, pnimi, everything. And the kav diminishes as it goes. So the kav is always I see that last chapter also, he went back to the kav. Whenever you talk about the kav, you know he's talking very much in the engine room. Because the kav is like the real force of which how God creates. It's the air that carries everything. Everything is carried through the kav. The kav even brings alive, is the catalyst that brings alive the kalim that are hidden in the oasis of the rishim. So when he says kav, he's talking here like the root, the stylus or the pen kav hamida. It's sometimes kav the line that measures, the measuring cup. But the kav is not just a measuring cup; it's actually a living entity. So it's like the thing that you need. So without a kav, you don't have all that's happening. So he's saying that what does bin anushis mean? The comprehension of things that are very distant, as the kav slowly went downward. B'shtalshlus hakav. That's what he's saying. But let's see. Let's continue here. This is now. So we're no longer talking the kav, or the energy as it's connected to the source and there's high revelations. Now we're talking the koyach hapel is going into. I'll give you an example. We have a lot of human beings. Let's take a human example. We have energy, right? You have intellectual energy, which is formidable. You can write something. You can do a lot of things. You can walk. You can communicate. You can innovate. But let's take koyach hazrika. You take a stone and you throw it. Someone doesn't know what you're about. Doesn't even know what a human being is like. And they see a stone flying and they see you threw it. How much of that will reflect on you? Very, very diminished. That you know how to throw a stone is not even a minuscule percentage of what your person is capable of. I don't mean throwing stones. I mean that you have intelligence and you have emotions and you can love and you can build and you can innovate and all that. So, but there is part of your koyach is going into the stones. You can't deny it. It's still your product. It's still your act. But when you look at the stone, you're seeing, as he's calling here dvarim muchashim, you're seeing koyach hapel. But yeah, you're seeing a koyach hapel. Clearly, it's coming from the one who threw it. But how far is it from the personality of the thrower, so to speak? Very far, very distant. That's what he's saying here. So he says like this: "Hu b'chins koyach hapel eliki sheba b'slapshus mamish." We're not talking about from a distance. We're talking about it's literally manifesting behanifel in the act that it is doing. The malchus. Look how low he diminishes it. He's speaking a little in so-called Kabbalistic language, kav, malchus, but that's what he's saying. He's saying the lowest of the chitzenis kelim. Not only is it kelim, it's chitzenis kelim, and not only is it malchus, it's malchus of malchus, and of what? Of asiyah. So what is that talking? That means we're not even talking malchus of asiyah. We're not talking kelim. We're not even talking primis kelim. We're not talking eir. We're talking the outer. How many outers are there? Chitzenis, kelim, malchus of asiyah. Like almost 5 diminishments in asiyah. And I forget about Yitzira and Bria and Atzilus. So you're talking here like an echo of an echo of an echo of an echo of the kav. It's like when we say sometimes, we look for sounds in outer space. They want to know if there are sounds. So if there's a sound, it's going to be very distant. It's going to be very faint. So the energy is here. So he's giving an example. He's trying to give an example of something of his Judaism. So Lakus now has manifest all the way in this lowest of levels. And this is the energy that is not even called energy. It's not even, you don't even call it chayis eliki. You call it kayach eliki, because kayach like kayach hazrika. Chayis would be if you, for example, really showed your strength, or you really you invest a lot of energy. Throwing a stone, especially a light stone. How much of your koyach is there? A small part of your koyach. You call it koyach. Koyach is far more removed from a person than their chayis. Okay. And there, in this low level, as manifest in koyach hapel benifel, there we can have actual comprehension with human logic, through physical things. And we'll explain this, but let me see what he says, and then we'll fill in whatever needs elaboration. Which means by comprehending the nifel. Nifel means here the product, like the stone that's flying in this case, or the sun is shining, or a blade of grass, or we're breathing. All things we can tangibly relate to. When you're masig, when you comprehend this nifel, shezehu royo masiga hetiv, and this he sees and comprehends well. When you see someone breathing, it's undeniable. You don't need a whole philosophy and a whole meditation on it. It's a tangible reality. What you're seeing is like a mashal, an example for the nimshal to the koyach eliki. You see what I'm saying? He's going in another gear. You see how he's speaking. It's a very.
Did you skip a line?
I don't think so. No. Yeah, you're right. I did skip a line. not the first time. Let's go back. How do you masigas akeich hapel v'goveya ma'al goveya? He comprehends. So when you look at the nifl, let's say you look at a person breathing. I'll explain in a minute why I'm using that example. So you see the keich hapel. There's something that's causing that breathing. Masa is a keich hapel, the cause of it. V'goveya ma'al goveya. I'm not sure what he means. Either he means that. And that through that you climb the ladder level after level, or he means on any level you have the same idea. In other words, gavay mal gavay, whether it's gavay mal gavay, it's an interesting expression. How do you basically say keich hapel v'gavay mal gavaya?
On all layers, in different layers.
Yeah, gavay mal gavay means higher above and higher and higher. That's what it means. Huh? I'm not sure. Maybe because he means like mashal nimshal. Like you go from the mashal to the nimshal to a higher mashal, higher nimshal. I don't know. I'm not positive. So as such, every physical thing, all physical things are like an example, a metaphor for a moral, which mashal el hanimshal la'keich elaki. It's interesting. Mashal el hanimshal doesn't say dehakeich elaki. It says Moshel el nimshal. It's an example to the moral. So it's a moshel to the nimshal to the keich elaki. Va'moshel hu nimshal mamish. Hey, by the way, you asked me for a line about a moshel. This is, I think, taken from Derech Mitzvah. Va'moshel hu nimshal mamish. The example, the metaphor, is the moral, is the thing itself. It's just in a garment. Va'achar ha'soga she'yedeo masik prote nimshal ma'moshel. And after the comprehension that he knows and appreciates the details of the moral from the metaphor, when he expresses, he finds all the details of the moral in the metaphor, in other words, the more you concentrate and focus and see the parallels between the example, between the metaphor and the moral, and its message, the more you come to appreciate that even the message, which initially was not tangible, you begin to have a tangible relationship with it because it came through a tangible example. He wants to give us a taste of Lashon Lavi, of Yediyah Mukhshis, that you should have tangible comprehension in the divine.
That's the purpose of the mashal to begin with.
Yeah.
It really works.
Yeah, exactly. But you see, the key thing is also the details. Not just that this is a mashal. Let's say a mashal fire is an example for Gvura. But when you really want to see it is when you start analyzing fire's properties and every detail. And you start seeing, that detail's in Gvura, and this detail's in Gvura, and the fire this, contracts things. And water expands, and then fire is reddish, and fire rises. The more you understand the properties, literally the scientific properties, the more you begin to relate the nimshal, and the more you have an idea of mukhshis, and then, like it says here, it was an expression, this of course explains the whole process of contemplating on the world and nature, and how that leads us to the divine. Yeah. For ozu keli umochin. That's an interesting expression. Then is a container and a mochin, a chamber, not a chamber. Mochin is a
dwelling place.
Yeah, a dwelling place. Mochin. Right. It's an expression sometimes used for the Beis Hamikdash, but you have also mochin chana. It's an academy, but it means a place. It's like a yeshiva. It's like a mochin. It's more than just a keli. You have what was the word I'm looking for? It's more than an institution, a resting place, a keli. Yeah, there's a word for it. An environment. The b'chin is bini law. So then ozu keli, then it becomes a keli. This nimshal becomes a container, or maybe the mashal becomes a container and a mochin. A mochin is it's like when you establish a base, or you establish, let's say, in honor of somebody, you establish a whole foundation. What do the presidents do after they retire? They make presidential museums, presidential libraries. So they make something that becomes an expression, like an edifice. Yeah, edifice is the word. Some type of memorial, not to say memorial, but an edifice or a type of a full entity that embodies something that you want to embody. That's what he's saying here. Okay, the mochin. The b'chin is bina ilah to the higher bina in Atzilus. Shu asog b'muhus hakav. That's already a comprehension in the muhus of the kav. So you started with a mashal, an example of something that you can touch. You recognize in it through your bina anushi, human logic, that fell in the shvira, as he said. You recognize in it all the elements of the nimshal, and that becomes a keli to bina, which answers the etzem akav, not as it goes all the way down through all the echoes, as I mentioned, all the reflections. And even though the infinite distance between them, I think here not the nimshal and bina ilah. Yeah, the bina down below and the bina above. Nevertheless, because it fell from there through a shvira, through a break. So it's therefore able to elevate to the root of its being chipped.
So where's the dogish here? On the nofel?
No, on Michael Lisalis. He's saying even though he says because it's memenu. The emphasis on memenu.
Not on the nofel?
No.
We were wondering before why the lotion is
nifila. I know, and shvira in Atzilus.
It's not inyan of ilah ve'olo.
He means to say that there's some type of like when you. Like shviras hakelim is you break the kelim. Like something like chitzva means, by the way, when you chitzva is a chip. More than chip. When you chip words out of a rock. You a stone, right? Yeah, you. Yun?
Yes.
H-E-W-N.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Yuning, yeah. No, so in other words...
No, but the nefila is from...
I don't have to explain. I'm not sure what he means by this. The shvira means that it doesn't come, like you said, ilval. It doesn't come... It's a jump. It's a jump. But it's a shtickle von dort.
Like a breakup.
It's similar to what he said before about Baruch. That when the Beis of Baruch is shlei berach to the word Baruch. But it's still the same Beis from Baruch. It's similar to that. I don't know if it's exactly. The shvira part I have to go back to. He said it. I don't know. But I'm not. It sounds like there's a shvira in Atzilus too. When a shvira goes into Bria, they see now. What you usually say is that seichel anushi has two parts. The seichel of it comes from Atzilus and Bria Yitzirasiyah, but the anushi part comes from Chochma of Tayu. That's what makes it anushi. In other words, to make it human. Like for example, when we say what's shvira sakelim, we say when you take an apple, or you take a physical object. The physicality of it comes from Tayu, but the spark of it, meaning the things you can relate to, don't necessarily. The truth is the spark also comes from Tayu. But the kelim, when they broke, they became klippas. The shells of Tayu fell here. The shells. So that's usually how you say the shvira. It's not really the shvira of the kelim of Atzilus. The shvira of kelim of Tayu. Why he's saying kelim of Atzilus? Because I guess it's because of going through because once the kelim fall, so there's a jump. That's why we can have seichel anushi, human seichel. And then comes Atzilus and gives it more of a commonality to Chochmah. That's how I would explain it initially, but that's not relevant right now to the main topic. The main point he wants to say is that it fell, it's taka distant from there, but nevertheless it's rooted there, and it can realign.
So it seems to imply that dasket has to be through nefila in order that it should be having.
Let me explain to you why. The reason it has to have nefila is because what makes seichel anushi. And why can't you just say, who says there's nefila? There's intelligence in Atzilus, that's divine intelligence. In Bria, let's call it angel intelligence. It's intelligence of the souls. It's not quite the Sagas HaMachus. They're not quite the bittul of Atzilus, but they still know godliness. The same Mitzias, they know of it. They don't know it as an experience, they know of it. And Yitzira, a lower level. And Nasiya, a lower level. And then, Nasiya Gashmis, our knowledge today is really that type of knowledge. No, there's one problem. If it would go like that, then we would not really be able to be egotistic thinkers and self-worshipping. People on earth can think about something and completely deny that it comes from anywhere. They're self-made. Where does that come from? If it's just gradations, then it should be diminished. But to the point that you can actually convince yourself that you're a self-made intellect, that has to come. There has to be some jolt, because that's a jump. That's already a radical jump. That's why you need a shvira. Like, for example, it says in Chassidus that when you learn Chachmas Chitzenius, you become more yesh. When you learn Chachmas Elokus, you become more batel. I remember the first time I learned it, I always wondered, one second, I know a lot of people learning Chachmas HaTeira and they become nice, good yesh too. And there are a lot of people who learn Chachmas Chitzenius and they're very humble people. It's not inherent. When you think about it, I'll tell you what, it's not really a critique. It's not like just saying, oh, you're a philosopher means you're a yesh. If you're a chassid, it means you're a batel. That's not what he's saying. He's talking about the chachma part of it. What does chachma chitzenius mean? So I once heard from, who said it? He said a good word, Rabbi Levi Weinberg from South Africa. He said, what's chachma chitzenius means? It's chachma. What does the word mean, chachma chitzenius? It's chachma of outer things. It's very profound chachma. What means chitzenius? So usually we say chitzenius means from foreign, from alien sources. Torah is chachma, primis comes from God, and that comes. You don't read chachmas chitzenius. You don't read svarim chitzenim, which is from foreign and alien authors. He had a good word. He says chachmas chitzenius means a chachma that misses the point. That's what it means. That's why it's called chitzenius. It misses the point. The point is that God gave us seichel. God gave us wisdom. As like Einstein said, we're looking to understand God's mind. We're not looking to understand, be smart and win an award and have a bigger ego. So Chachmas Chitzenius is because what does it deal with? It deals with understanding the universe. That's what all science is about. So how could something that understands the universe become batel? It is part of the universe. On the contrary, the more you understand the universe, the more the universe becomes important, the more powerful it is, and the more powerful you are. So it's not a critique. Obviously there are people who understand that itself and they realize the wisdom should humble me. But by nature, understanding something doesn't make that thing less valuable, makes it more valuable. That's what means it makes you more of a yesh. Not necessarily that you could be a very refined person, but you're studying existence and you're giving it value, and the more you understand existence, the more nispal, the more influenced you are and impressed by existence. Because you say, look, existence, wow, it's not just a volcano, it's a whole thing, a human being. So technically, it should make you more mitzias, not less mitzias. When you're learning Chassidus, you learn Primis HaTeira especially, you're not learning about existence, you're learning how existence is meaningless. That the one who put it here is here, and everything is God's power. And whatever you see is a minuscule little thing compared to like I said, with throwing the stone. Even the most profound science is nothing compared to the divine reality. So it ultimately really undermines existence. But however, God wants existence, that's why we're still here. But fundamentally, it's a teaching that basically is here to demolish existence, if you know what I'm saying. I don't mean demolish, annihilate, and destroy the world. I mean it means to destroy the value of the world. And realize its whole purpose is God wants a home here. That's all it is. But Chachmas Chitzenius is invested. Like I said, you can't ask a scientist. A real scientist should tell you, if you ask me as a scientist, I can take you all the way till the first Big Bang. I can't tell you a second before, because I have nothing in science that talks about it before. Science only talks about the Metzias of Welt. It doesn't talk to me how the Metzias came to be. The problem we have is when we argue with the science is, so don't speculate. Don't say there's no God. Say, I can't go there because science doesn't take me through that door. So I stop here. It would be like saying, like a lawyer will tell you, I've told you everything legally, the rest you need to go to an accountant. I've given you what I can give you in my realm. A scientist can say that absolutely. I can tell you about the Metzias of the world, and I can elaborate, and I can go as far as I can go. But their point, you're asking me to go now a second before the Big Bang, that's metaphysics. That's spirituality. That you need to go to Torah, to God. I can't say anything about it, because all I can do is talk about Metzias. That's the true definition of science, and as best as human beings can figure out. Also, I don't have any divine revelation. No scientist says I have divine revelation. We humans, through observation, through experimentation, through theory, through so on and so on, we come to understand the best we could what existence is. Torah, on the other hand, comes to tell you what God wants. It's coming the whole opposite. God put this world in place. The world is batel v'metzias, etc., etc., etc. Why am I saying all this? Is because that's why you need a shvira to get to Seichel Anushi. Because Seichel Anushi adds an ingredient that cannot just come through a normal gradation of a tzimtzum from Atzilus to Bria. It has an element of that it becomes zich. There's the self involved. It doesn't mean you can't, through science, come to understand God. But there's an element that adds the husk you could say the layer of the yesh has to come through Shvira, because that's not going to come from Atzilus. You diminish Atzilus even to the total diminishment, a yesh will not come out of that. The yesh has to come from some jump.
Well, this is all fine if you're focusing on the thought process, whether you're focusing on science or you're focusing on Malachus. But even Chitzonius, what it's called? Chitzonius.
Chachmas Chitzonius.
That's also from the Eibishter. When you focus on the process.
No, that's
the process. Even when you happen to be using it for Chachmas Chitzonius, nevertheless, it has to come through.
You got it. I didn't finish the second half of the equation here.
Sorry.
No, but you're saying, it's not sorry, you're exactly right. That's exactly what I was going to say next. I was establishing why you need Shvira, because you see the way Chachma works here, it doesn't need to, you could see it can just become self-absorbed and never go back to its source. It could just be stuck, as we see many people. Then comes the second half. The fact is, I said, so even though, let's read now the line, you'll see what I'm saying. So he says like this, so yeah, it was a shvira and it fell and all that. Because at the end of the day, even Chachmas Chitzonius, even the Chachma within the mashal, in other words, observing something in this world, did come from there. Yes, it came through a fall, not a gradual way. But it did originate there, so that's why you can retrace it. Exactly right.
A fall, does that mean it skips levels?
A fall means there's a radical jump. It's like let's put it this way. If I wanted to let's say transmit water to you right now, so I create a little path and there's water. But let's say there's a big impediment I have to get over. So I can't just send it to you a regular flow. I need to jump. Yeah, you need a jump. You need some type of shift. Shvira essentially means it's not orderly. You need to break something to get there. You have to break a membrane, so to speak, to crack through. Or the thing cannot in its natural form just be diluted. Like for example, we break down. When we break down through the digestive process, we break down food. Why do we break it down? Because the food, till it gets to your bloodstream, it's not just a gradual process. It needs to be broken down, eliminate waste, etc. I mean, it's basically reflective of a dilug, of a jump. That's what Shvira really is. I mean, in Toyu, Shvira is also due to the intensity. But what it results is, it creates something that, it's almost like when you have shock treatment, when you're teaching somebody, you teach them an idea, but you see they're not getting it, so you give them a type of shocking statement to jolt them a little. That's like a shvira. You break their resistance by throwing in something that is like, what, like that. It's an example for...
It's like saying a joke, like Rabbi.
But the key thing is the retracing. Remember, all this is coming to explain how we understand the kus from Dvarim Muchashim. Let's go on. But this is specifically through this method of comprehension that we discussed earlier. In other words, it's not just comes easily. It takes work. What's the work? First step is you have to know the example, and then you have to see in the example, appreciate or understand the nimshal, the moral, in all the details from the mashal. It's not just enough to say fire gvura or something like that. You want to be able to see the nimshal in the mashal in every detail of it. The koyach hapoel in the nifel.
Did you have to jump the other way now?
Yeah, looks. Let me see how we're going. And then step 2.
From by knowing all the protein, it would seem like with this explanation, if you know all the protein of the external gashmis, which is from Eloki, but you go
100%. Absolutely.
So scientists eventually
are far greater understanders of God. Yeah, absolutely. There's an expression with Psari Echzelka. I spoke once for a medical conference. My talk was about medicine in the future, Mashiach. So I brought that. It says Mashiach will come, there will be no more illness and so on. I explained why, because illness is about dissonance, about dichotomy, splits. And when there's a flow between matter and energy, soul and body, why would there be anything unhealthy? So Adam Mechava would have lived forever had they not punctured, so to speak, their material keli. Because a neshama has bligvul energy. Why should a soul have to leave a body unless the body is damaged or in some way wounded, or punctured? No, I explained it at length about the neshama, guf, and all that. It was very good, very well received. Then the doctor gets up and says, okay, if that's the case, what's going to happen with all doctors when Mashiach comes? Out of a job. So after the prerequisite joke, that's why they charge so much today for a long retirement. I said, on the contrary, you have to understand, doctors then will be teachers of the brilliant wisdom with which God created the human being in the divine image. So I say divine image. What do I know about the body? Yeah. So doctors will be studying the infinite knowledge. We say, "Mipsari, my flesh, I behold God." So you doctors have particular knowledge that no one else has. That's what you'll be doing. They were I remember I got a standing ovation for that. They liked that. And I said, I am sure that all of you would appreciate doing that much more than saving lives and dealing with blood and dealing with fixing the broken. Because then you're just better of really appreciating the inner anatomy, explaining the anatomy of the divine. And the same thing with physicists, and the same thing with any expert. To me, this is given. And the Rebbe said similar things, but I remember a letter.
How was it received?
Very well. They loved it. No, really. They came for that purpose. It was very well received. The truth is, in the Geras HaKedesh Simcha Chavav, he says something similar. Not quite that. Geras Simcha Chavav is the Rayim Hemna there. That Pnimis HaTeira is called Eitz HaChaim, and Nigla is called Eitz HaDas. So he says, how could you call Nigla Teira Eitz HaDas Teverah? Teverah? So the answer is, it's not about Teverah, the tinus of Teverah, because Nigla deals with arguments of Sheker and Emes and good and evil, and has to rule on this world. Pnimis HaTeira doesn't deal with the corruption of this world, or the litigation, or the challenges and damages and so on. So Pnimis HaTeira is less. It says less Taman leMachlekas leKasha. That's why in Pnimis HaTeira you don't have questions and arguments. The Rebbe speaks about the fact that sometimes you do, but it's not quite like in Gemara. But then he asks at the end of the Geras HaKedesh, say Bazei, when Mashiach comes and then we'll know will be Teverah in the world, what are we going to learn Nigla for? We don't need to know Halach, because there's no. What do you mean Mevar? Teverah. And the answer is then it will be for Yechudim Elyanim, because then the Torah will be literally to understand God deeper, basically. And so it's not about ruling whether you're right or I'm wrong. Will be. He says it clearly in Geras HaKedesh.
But he also says over there that you need for Pigul and for the Kabbalah.
For the first stage, but then he says then comes the Kufa of Mitzvah P'telis. That's the first time, but then he says Mitzvah P'telis. There's a stage where you won't need that either. Yeah.
So we're learning the
copies of Torah and Nigla will come to.
Exactly. Through Pratim Adil, you'll come to understand God's mind. Because remember, at the end of the day, the Torah is God's mind. The fact that it relates to the world is because God happened to put a world here, but it didn't start from the world. It started from Torah. First, God had a logic. Then He created a world. Why am I saying this? Because I want to go back a moment here. What was I going to say? This is a klal. What he's saying here is tremendous. Because mamish the klal and all. This is what Chassidus is. It's not just that we look at the world and we say God created the world. The world is godliness dressed up in a mushal. That's all. It's dressed up. This is dressed up in a body, so doctors can understand. This is dressed up in physics. This is dressed up in medicine. This is dressed up in mathematics. This is dressed up in accounting. Whatever you find in the world is simply a garment for an imshal. So you could have a saga mukhshis and alakus if you understand that. Because you're not talking about understanding Atzilus. We're talking about take a doctor, take a scientist, take anything that we're an expert in, and dissect it. You know it well. This becomes a idea mukhshis and alakus as soon as you add that one jump, which is that it's not self-made, that it is coming from a source. I'll give you an example. I saw in a letter from the Rebbe. It was a tremendous letter for me because it confirmed so many things. I always knew it, but the letter really was the nail in the, I don't want to say, the final resonance. It was resonance. The letter is a letter to a guy who owns a laundromat, of all things. Listen, I don't know. Listen, racism will not be tolerated at this table. So the Rebbe writes to a laundromat, and he says to them that everything is divine providence. Since you do this work, everything has a lesson in life. And the Rebbe goes on to say the following. The Rebbe says everything is hashgacha pratis. Everything one does in his life is a lesson in life, a lesson for the God. So I want to suggest a lesson here from laundry. Okay, so the Rebbe says like this. What's the concept of laundry? Concept is, of all things, laundry. It's like such a mundane thing. You wouldn't think. The Rebbe says laundry is basically you buy new clothing, you wear it once, twice, 3 times. After a while, it gets soiled and wrinkled and dirty. So at some point you can't wear it anymore. You have to throw it out. So came the chiddush of laundry. You give it to a laundromat, and the Rebbe says, here's what they do. The first thing is they wash it. They wash it in water. They wash it with warm water, not cold water. They mix chemicals in it to get the stronger stains out. Then after it all, they put it under a heavy press, and you get out a fresh garment. You can repeat this process many times. It's almost like new. That's what the Rebbe said. It's in Hebrew, the letter, but this is then he says, so the lesson is like this. Neshama shenasata bi tahirahi. Everybody's got some neshama that's tahira. It's pure, clean. Then it goes through life, and it gets soiled and wrinkled and challenged. And we all go through life. It breaks us. It hurts us. I forget the exact language. So you could think, okay, listen, you had one chance, and that was it. You messed up. So the Rebbe said, no. You have to put it into mayim. Ein mayim ela teira. So immerse it into water. The next thing, it has to be warm water, not kalt. Amalek, varmkeit, warm, chmimus, passion. Then you mix chemicals. There's a mitzvah tefillin, and there's a mitzvah called mezuzah. I've got the example, kashrus. Each chemical deals with different stains that you incurred. And then you put it under a heavy press called kabbalas oil, that you commit to something beyond yourself. And your neshama, you re-experience the tahirahi. And you can do this many times over. So it's a beautiful, nice, but I'll tell you what I took from it. It was more than just the lesson. The lesson is great. I realized that it's not just a cute thing. Actually, if a person with godly eyes, everything he sees godliness. There's no such, where did laundry come from? Who created it? Some guy came up with an idea? Yeah, he came up with it. He doesn't know that it came. But it's an example. Why? How can we humans innovate a thing like that? Because our minds are wired by God that has allowed us to. So it's infinite. So literally, there's no equation, no theory that is. I'm talking about a decent, a normal theory. Not talking about mishagas. That doesn't have even mishagas. You could say that doesn't have some spiritual root. But you can't jump to Atzilus because we don't relate to Atzilus. So you have to look for it. That's why he said the details. You see, in this mashal, the Rebbe doesn't just say, "Oh, laundry renews." It's the details, the water, it's the chemicals, it's the press, it's everything. So the details make you really start relating to it, and it becomes to a point that you don't say this is a mashal, that really God wanted us to understand the Shama Shem Sat B'Teiri. That's why He allowed laundry to be invented, even a mundane thing like laundry. Whenever I see these nature shows, I'm blown away. Today with the cameras, the life of leopards underwater, little insects, flowers. It's miraculous. It's unbelievable, and it's a multitude. You know how many different systems there and different rules. A person can spend his whole life understanding God just by studying nature. Doesn't need to go anywhere else. All you got to do is apply yourself and look at these things, and you find tremendous lessons. Not just wonder about God, but actual lessons in life. I read the most efficient architecture is if you have a small space. What's the best way to build in a small space? The maximum use of space. They discovered it from bees. Bees, a catacomb, hexagon. Hexagons are the best use of space because they take up everything. Squares have problems, and circles for sure. It's a whole thing, all based on someone came up with the idea because he saw a honeycomb. Hexagons. And I'm just giving one example. Everything, listen, a camera is the eye, an airplane is a bird. And it's not just, that's where we got the idea from. And we copied a bird's, what do they call it? Aerodynamics is what we just replicate in a different proportion in a plane. It looks like a bird. Why are there wings? Etc., etc. So I'm saying, what's missing, however, is that we live there's one thing missing, the shvira. That we live in a world that has a type of veil that can convince us that it's only about our survival and not about God. That's where you need
many dimensions away instead of just being.
But this is why I think this chapter, in that sense, unbelievable. I mean, he doesn't even say it's so specific; it's more abstract in a way, but it's clear that's what he's saying here.
The Torah itself is a mashal.
We said mashal kadmeni, exactly. In other words, the point is the interface. We have in our world, as far as it is from God, we have in it real reminders and actual manifestations of the divine that you just have to uncover. That means that you can go all the way from down here, all the way up. Yeah. So there we go. But Tafke B'Hasaga now. The first thing you first need to understand is Nimshal Ma'mashal B'chol Pratav. You have to understand the Nimshal, the moral from the example in all details. You can't be lazy. You can't be general. Yeah. And afterwards, afterwards, when he finds the details of the Nimshal from the Mashal, in other words, now he's understanding how all these details apply in the Nimshal, in the moral. Mizdachich etzlei hamashal. What a nice lashon. The mashal becomes refined, becomes mizdachich, becomes subtler, refined. The mashal becomes refined. He's not saying that you just now jumped and you no longer need the mashal. We're talking now the mashal that you just saw as a mashal is becoming a vehicle. Exactly.
You're turning it around.
Yeah, right. Now listen to the parentheses. And it appears to him now the mashal as a koyach eliki. It's no longer a physical thing. It's now a divine power. Laundry has become now a divine way of communicating to us. The body, when it reacts a certain way, it's God's way to speak to you. Why
Kamei?
Yeah, and by again, it depends whether he's interpreting himself or this is from somewhere else. Here I would think it's the Rebbe Rashab himself. But what does it mean? Why do we say kamoi? Only like? Because it's not like you're actually seeing godliness. Like someone who sees the literally the birthing from Ayin to Yesh, which is mamish seeing the divine. Like it says elsewhere. Wow, this is an interesting chapter. Because at the end of the day, all this is still comprehension. You're not seeing, you can't say I'm seeing godliness. It's like seeing the power of the divine in it. It's like when you see the stone flying, you realize the power of your arm is in it. But you're not seeing the power, you're just relating to it in such manner. But on the other hand, it's not meaningless. The Inyan is the mashal is so refined for him to the extent that the unity, the fusion between example, metaphor, and the message and the medium, basically, the message and the medium becomes so united, so fused, he sees and feels it like a koyach eliki. So you look at a flower, you literally can come to a point where you see it as being a divine expression.
You don't see the rose, the 13 petals, you see the 13 midas rachman.
Yeah, almost. But it's hasaga. But it's a hasaga that's like hasaga is almost like muhus. That's what he's saying here. Wow. There's nothing like this. I can tell you right now. There's no mamorim anywhere that talks to this extent. This is what was usually spoken off the record. If you were by Yechidus, he has the Rebbe to explain to me a little. He may say something like this. But formally in a Maimer, it's clear this is only an Ayin Beis. Not some of them. He never speaks anywhere. So misdachich and misachid that literally, yeah. This is applied chassidus. This is real applied chassidus.
Wasn't it that Rabbi Rashab told one of his mosquitoes to bring me a plate?
It's in Torah Shalom, yeah. Not mosquitoes, it was by Fabring, and he said, bring me a plate, and then he changed his mind. He said, there'll be megashemit. Yeah, because that's not them studying the plate and knowing all the details and working on their own. It would be him doing it, and their eyes would not be able to see it. They'd see magic. They think he's doing magic. Like let's say the plate started flaming. They think, okay, he's a magician. Not talking magic here. We're talking here. It's beautiful. Okay. Wow. Oh boy, mischadish. Something happened here. It's not just you got back. It was mischadish.
Process of connecting back the
because you took a gashmizdike thing that on its own could have been the mashal. So mischadish hasaga muchshis, something new, because you wouldn't have muchshis. If someone said to you, "Let me explain to you Gvura Vatzilis," okay, I'll talk. Okay, I understand. I take you fire, and you start studying the fire in every detail. And you start saying, "Wow, this is Gvura." So now you have the chiddush that's muchshis. It's like the bacha that went the first time on a date. He says she doesn't look like Malchus. So I said, 1 second, my friend, that is Zohar Malchus. Oh, yes, muchshis.
Wow. Was it the process of husband and wife?
The truth is,
Malchus.
husband and wife is simply a mashal. That since nothing else worked for 20 years, they say, you know what? Okay, just get married and we'll do it that way.
No, but we can't get against the target to them. The nimshal.
When it breaks the flowers and the breaks the
One thing for sure, that Zohar and Malchus don't communicate so well together. They're very different worlds. That's for sure. The mashal.
Maybe mashal and nimshal.
Yeah, exactly. As they say, some people say men are from the Kav and women are from the Rishima.
From the Rishima.
Kalim from the Kav.
It says in the Spanish Bezeh, not in the Spanish Translate.
No, Bezeh, because Bezeh through in this process of the Moshel Gashmi.
Becoming like
and that's exactly the diuk. He wants to say Bezeh. No, the Moshel Gashmi adds something that the Nimshal would not have for us. The Mukshis. That's what he's saying, Bezeh. Yeah.
Like he said, it's fire, When you realize
good stuff. This is good stuff, my friends. After this chapter, no excuse. You go outside now, you better start seeing Elikus.
Why do we have to go outside? Can we do it in here?
Yeah.
Too many Bali B'chira in one room. Nature is far less of an adversary.
Okay, so what's
okay. And this turns him into. Look at his mom is saying why you learn this. It makes you a keli. That when it comes to asid, it won't be something that's completely out of the blue. You would have tasted it.
So basically, asid lova is the goal linear of nimshal and moshel.
But complete. But then it'll be complete. Elam Haza will be yellow. Yeah. V'yesh leimer. V'yesh leimer, and we can say shezeu ashleimer she'ilosid ba'avedis haberurim da'achshav. That this is what?
From the avedis haberurim.
Yeah. Me'avedis, right? This is the shleimer. This is the fruition or the realization, the perfection that will be in the future from the avedis berurim of now. Our refinement that we achieve now. And that's the repair that we do in the dvarim techtenim hagashmi, the lower physical things, and the etzem haguf, and your actual body. Yeah.
You never said enough was done already.
I remember when the Rebbe spoke to the wounded, to the what he called the special soldiers, the ones that were wounded, the miyuchadim. He said no, mitzuyanim. So he went and he said, I want to shake everyone's hand. He says, because shaking your hand is chomesh lachomesh, it's the esses spheres. So my 5 fingers and your 5 fingers will be the esses spheres. So it wasn't just a line, it was actually by Rebbe. I'm bringing down, when you see 5 and 5, these are your 10 spheres in your system. I remember once the Rebbe spoke about a face. It also says in his farm, face is Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Yud is the eyes, the nose is the Vav, the mouth is the Hey, and I think, what's the first Hey? The ears? Maybe, yeah. But in other words, you can see something that Tzelem Elokim is actually imprinted in us. It's not just a metaphor.
How did he speak to the soldiers? Some are missing hands, some had blown up faces. I mean, how does he say this stuff?
Well, most of them were not missing. They mostly were in wheelchairs, and they were,
Yeah.
Well, those he couldn't shake their hand, he didn't shake their hand, but he shook many hands. He went around. I remember Lamed Vav. It was a very fascinating sikha about special. It was about calling special and not because everyone has.
From the Yom Kippur War,
Yeah.
From then it started the special needs.
Yeah. Anyway, so here we go. The taken etzmaguf, fine. Etzmaguf. Shazel tachas hakavani b'ridus haneshama lamata, and this is the ultimate purpose of the soul's descent below. See, this is why we came down below, for this purpose. Ukidu the neshama atzme ein tzarich tikun. As it's known, the soul itself doesn't need repair, like he says in Tanya. Now we're into Skarbova waters, huh? This is already, everybody knows this language, this piece. And we came down not for itself, but in order to repair and to refine the body and the animal soul.
What does it mean to refine the body? I mean, it's not going to be the same body loss of love. A person passes on, and then when there's a new body. So when we say refining the body, it's not like he's using the same body, all are refined, and he's ready for Mashiach.
That's not correct what you're saying.
I said it with the previous body.
I mean, he's bringing back the Gashmis to its source.
When a person puts on film, when a person aligns their body to do a pi halacha what God wants, a yad mechalek tzedakah, like he says in Tanya, that yad becomes refined begashmis, and it's forever retained in the body.
But then the body decays.
No, it doesn't. That's why Tchias HaMesim you're suggesting is not a reward for the body. That body that did the mitzvahs is not being rewarded according to you. So it undermines the whole meaning of Tchis
According
HaMesim.
to me, the body decays. There's no body.
I just asked you a question. The whole meaning of Tchis HaMesim is to reward the soul and the body. The body did mitzvahs. You're saying it's not that body that did the mitzvahs is not being rewarded. It decayed. So explain that.
The Gashmis becomes Ruchnis, it goes back to
So no, I'm saying this is a question of Nigla. Why? Well, Tchis HaMesim is meant to be a reward for a body. You're saying that the guy who did the mitzvahs didn't get reward. He got decayed. So what's the schar? The answer is that the body has two parts. There's a physical part, but there's also the physical root of the soul in the body, which always retained. The mitzvah remains there, and when the body will return, it won't just be. It'll be that body. It will be rebuilt from the luz. It will be rebuilt. It's not a. And the person who refined himself will have a different type of experience than someone who didn't. It doesn't. The mitzvahs don't die. The body may decay, but the mitzvah doesn't die. Just because it decays in your eyes, anyone. No. The body. First of all, do you know anything about matter and energy? Matter doesn't disappear. It's just in a different form. What means decay? The word decay is not a legitimate word today in science. Decay is like something becomes a gas from water. It doesn't mean it decayed. It just changed form. That's number one. Number two, regardless. You're basically questioning the whole point of mitzvahs with Gashmis. It has nothing to do with this. What's the point of a mitzvah in Gashmis? It doesn't change the world.
We're talking about refining the Gashmis.
Right.
So we said refining the Gashmis. I'm not talking about the.
You take your hand instead of using it for selfish purposes, and you give tzedakah. Your hand forever is changed, and any decaying does not happen to that. It will forever be retained. If it's whether you want to call it the energy of the body. You want an explanation of the energy? Fine. The DNA, you call it the DNA.
Okay. Fine.
But this question is not on this. This is a question you're asking is in Gemara.
Goes into the luz. The whole thing is.
Yeah, you could explain that as well. There's another way to explain that. It's all in the luz, and when the luz is just rebuilding that same body. V'hu lifel ba'nefesh habamis. This is to affect the animal soul that should not be drawn, should not follow coarse things. And that which you must do should all be with intention for the sake of heaven. Both in eating and drinking, that it shouldn't be just to indulge your desire, but to preserve the body in order to be learned and to pray. And then inevitably or naturally he'll be careful from meses, from extras. What do we call it? Extraneous or unnecessary indulgences, luxuries. The mashu muterloi harizerak mitzad taiva. Masha moiserloi, probably.
Today's time, yeah.
Is that moiserloi, right? Not muterloi.
Today's yom.
But masha moiserloi, meaning that he wants it. That's like an extra to him. That's only. But why does he need it? He doesn't need it to survive. He needs it because of his desire. But rather it should be not with mesas, but rather that he is satisfied, suffices with only what is necessary. And that too, even what's necessary, is also towards sake of heaven. And when he studies and prays with the power of the food that he ate, that is then it's included in Kedusha and holiness. So basic same thing as in business. Masamaten, okay, either. Basic masamaten, so the intention there in his work is not to accumulate wealth, treasure, wealth, prosperity. And also not neutral, not without any kavanah. Ki'im with a kavanah. In order they should be able to perform mitzvahs like the mitzvah of tzedakah, l'lamed ban of Torah, and to teach children Torah, u'kahai gavnas, etc. Through this he refines the physical things that he's involved in, and they elevate and are encompassed in godliness. And also the animal soul is refined and is cleansed and refined through this. Uba mitzvah is mizbared, is like cleared. Okay. Uba mitzvah tzedakah nasa birur b'yesem b'chol mitzvahs, and through tzedakah the birur becomes increasing more than all the mitzvahs. K'may shekasa b'sefer Shabbein and Perek Lamed Zayin, like he says in Tanya Perek Lamed Zayin, mepnei shaharevach ba loy b'gi shaharevach ba loy b'gi shaharevach ba loy shaharevach ba loy b'gi is kol keches shalei, because he explains there that revach, which is the profit. The money he makes is through the effort of all his faculties, all the nefesh habamas. So mizbar close on nefesh habamas b'zeh. With other mitzvahs like eating or others, it's only one part of the nefesh habamas. But money is chaya nafshe, he says in Tanya. It represents all of you, all your effort, all your time, all your ingenuity, and therefore when you give tzedakah, you're elevating the entire nefesh habamas. And through this work of refining and repairing the animal soul and all the physical things the below, he becomes a keli, a mochin, what do you say? An edifice. To appreciate to the comprehension that will be in the future, b'chinas mahus elikus, in understanding the extra core of elikus of the divine. So in a way, the second half of this chapter went a little lower. First he said that everything is a mashal tanimshal, and now he said that's the whole purpose of basically refining the world, is turning the world into being a mashal telekus, essentially. What time do we have?
10 to 11.
Okay, that's 10 to? Okay, I'll finish. I'll run this right now. According to this, we'll understand what it says about kindle the flames or elevate the flames el-mul. They should all be facing toward the center of the face of the menorah. So Pnei HaMenorah is Primis HaChochma. Pnei HaMenorah is the Primis of Chochma. Because the light of the menorah in general, that's Chochma. As it's known the difference between the light of the candelabra and the fire of the altar. The fire of the altar is the level of malchus, and in its root is bina. The outer bina. It's a state of passion and flaming, and sparks of fire. The passion of fire. Rishpe is like passion of fire. Slav is flaming and passion of fire. Intensity. And the Eir HaMenorah, on the other hand, doesn't have that. It's a quiet flame. Because there it burns from the oil, and the oil is it's not a flaming thing, it's quiet and silent. Shem and Zayazach, that's Chachma. And this is the level of inner Chachma. So the Mizbeach is Malchus and outer Bina, and this is Primis HaChachma. Shezeh inyan Shem and Mishchas Kedesh HaMeshach Es HaKedesh B'chinas Chachmas Timah, and that's what means Shem and Mishchas Kedesh, the oil that anoints, the holy anointing oil. Kedesh HaMeshach Es HaKedesh, it anoints that which is holy, and that's the level of Chachmas Timah, the hidden Chachma. B'Chachma Zeh B'chinas Primis Atzmas HaChachma, and the revealed Chachma is the inner and core of Chachma. And Aaron, who lit the menorah, he's the one that transmitted this level into the souls of Israel. The Aaron is Nira. Aaron is the same letters as Nira, which means apparent, to appear. Nira Eir. Shehim shel b'chinas Riyah. So Aaron means Nira, that it should appear, which means he drew down level of Riyah, to see. Ubo esis Nira b'tziru shem Aaron. And in the case of Aaron, the letters Nira come in a configuration like Aaron. The V'lei b'tziruf Nira. Why is it then just say Nira? Why is Aaron called? Why is it only a tziruf? Another configuration. So he says Lefish Aaron b'chinas Bina, because Aaron himself is the level of Bina. U'kidu the Moshe v'Aaron Chachma Bina. Moshe and Aaron Chachma Bina. Aval zeh b'chinas Primis Bina. B'chinas Hasagas HaMuhus. And here, when he lit the menorah, however, he wasn't just on his own level, he was elevated to the level of Primis Bina, which is Hasagas HaMuhus. So in other words, Aaron himself is the level of regular Bina. And when he lit the menorah, that's why it becomes Nira.
Wow.
So he is elevated to a higher level, Primis Bina. This is what Aaron affected Avarabba. which is a certain high level of ava, intense ava, in the souls of Israel. The ava, and ava, love comes through comprehension. The mechinas riyah, the chachma, hayikir hu bechinas hayira. Because from seeing the vision of chachma, the primary thing is not ava. There you come more to awe. Chol ava ba'ay de'asaga. Ava, on the other hand, is all love comes through comprehension. So bina. So therefore, Aaron brings nira. Aaron brings nira. He said, but through hasagas moves through bina, through comprehension. Whereas chachma, on its own, would be so. Aaron is like basically the bridge between bina and chachma. Because chachma on its own would bring awe, yira. Aaron, who's bina, elevates to light the menorah, that brings nira, masagas samuhus, like a comprehension that's like seeing, like as if you see it. The love of Aaron is from the level of comprehending the core. And it's known the difference between the love of Avram and the love of Aaron. The love of Avram was the comprehension that came from the outer dimension of Bina, like we spoke, the more external level. And the love of Aaron is from the inner dimension of Bina. The first and there he explains this a little differently, I guess. That's in a form of vision, but it comes through bitterness. Because the oil, Shem and Zay, the Zay is probably bitter, I believe, because the olive. But in other words, it's just qualifying that in the parentheses. Here he's speaking about it somewhat differently. And this is the meaning, kindle the flames. The flames are the souls of Israel. And Aaron elevates these flames. And Aaron pnimis abina. In other words, draws into them the higher level of Av that comes from comprehension of the muhus. That's higher than Avram. And that's why it says that all 7 flames should light, not just 6. They refer to the Zayin, the 7 emotions, which are the root of all souls. The soul, the root of all the souls, is from the 7 midas, like he explains in L'Kutei Torah there. And Aaron elevated these 7 flames. He drew down into all the souls the inner dimension of Bina. Remember, we learned Aaron was down crestfallen, because he said after the tribes brought all the offerings, "What about me?" He says, "Yours will be greater than theirs." Chayach. No. Chayach. Yeah. Why? Because the work of the dedication of the leaders of the tribes, that was the work of karbonis, the offerings that are on top of the outer altar. Like we learned before, right? Yeah, chitzeni is bina. So that's on the altar, the flame. And that's why yours is greater. What did I say? Greater. Is because you light and repair and improve, not native, refine. Native means to clean. The flame, because you bring primis bina, which is infinitely higher. Repair. And this is letting of the flames to draw down on them love toward the face of the neder. Primis chachma, primis bina. Primis of chachma and the primis of bina. Yi'iru shivas aneres kol hazayim adreges ben sham. All the 7 levels, all of the souls will be illuminated. Val zaymer chayecha shel chagad l'mishalem sha'atam mamshil behem b'chinas hasagas hamohus. That yours is greater than theirs because you will draw down hasagas hamohus. So the whole story that he was discussed about the primis chachma bina, this is a taste of loss of love, is the story of Baal Eischa. Primis chachma, primis bina, it all fits into that.
So the oil is a primis chachma, that's the fusion of bina and primis bina when it faces the...
Yeah, Aaron is the one that is like the bridge between primis bina and chachma. Chachma alone is riyah, beyond existence. Aaron is bina, so it's asagas, existence. And when Aaron lights the menorah, it's nira, and becomes riyah in like chachma and in bina. The combination of the two we discussed. Kitzur.
It's riyah and bina.
And me'ein zeh, what we discussed, the yichud pnimi of chachma bina, is when you know God is b'muchish with you tangibly. Because seichel, the human intellect, falls. It comes in a falling fashion from the container of bina lahasik dvarim hamuchoshim, that allows us to appreciate, to understand tangible matter. Which, if you sent a neshama of Atzilus to this earth without the nefila, it would not be able to understand physical things. It would be strange to it. Like, what is this? It would only relate to spiritual ideas. So the physical ideas comes from nefila. Ubahanifl yevin keichapel, and from the one second, my friends. What happened now? And from the nifl yevin, from the action, from the effect, object, we can understand the keichapel, the power that invested in that object, or in that pool, in that action. From the action, you can understand the one who created that action, or affected that action. And with a good comprehension, the details of the metaphor as they are in the example. Details of the moral as they are in the example. He sees it actually, and then in the mashal, in the example, he sees the whole metaphor, the whole moral, and by him it becomes like a koyach eliki. This comprehension elevates to the root of where it was all chipped off from. And the root of where it was chipped off from the container of bina, that is hasagas hamuhus, that he has a comprehension of the core. V'yashlem shezeh hashlem is the lasid. We can say this is the perfection that will be in the future. The completion, that will be through today's work, today's refinements. Through this we'll understand what it means by leischa es hanedes. Pnei ha-meneda primius chochma. The face of the meneda is the primius of chochma. Ba'adn primius bina. And An is the primius of bina. V'hu himshach b'chinezu b'neshamas Yisrael. And he drew this down in the souls of Israel. So we finished chapter 30, Maimer 35, chapter 140, page 270 and 271.